This is my oh so fancy gluing tray, made from a couple strips of used plywood, piece of hardwood on the end. Now I'm going to take those hardwood strips of bloodwood and maple and put them in here. Like this. Then I have another strip of bloodwood, the same thickness. I'm just going to use to support this when I put some clamps on. With the clamps on and the glue, I will just use this to knock them all down to the same level. All right, that should work well. It does not take long for the glue to grab, so I'm going to glue this number of strips together, let the glue cure, and then I'll come back and do the rest of the strips. All right, I'm just going to wipe with a damp cloth to get the glue off of there, let this cure, and then I'll be back to put the rest of the strips on. All right, this is just a hair over 6 3/4 of an inch. The blade on my table saw will only come up 3 inches, so I'll have to cut it from both sides and then finish it on the band saw. Now, this is 23/32 of an inch thick. If I reduce that by the 1/8 of an inch thickness of the kerf, I'm going to have 19/32. Half of that, 9.5 32, is almost precisely what I've got this set at. I might be out at 1/64 of an inch, but when I finish cutting this, it's going to have to go through the drum sander anyway. So I'm going to cut this now from both edges. All right, the drum sander took them down to 1/4 of an inch thick, and these are 5/16 of an inch wide. So now it's time to go on to the next step. I made this drawing to show the shape I want for this small hollow form I want to turn. Each of these spaces is the thickness of one of the discs that I'm going to use, 1/4 of an inch. I've shown the width of each of these rings and added 1/4 inch, so I have some to play with a little bit. I don't want to make it exactly the right width or I could end up in trouble. As you can see, there are 18 rings, if you want to call them that, for a total of 4 1/2 inches high. The center of this board is right here, and I've made a bit of a squiggle mark just so I don't have to count over 11 every time I want to make a mark here. I need to put my compass, which I have set to 3 1/4 inches to give me the 6 1/2 inch diameter, exactly on the center. Accuracy is very important in this. Now I want to draw that 6 1/2 inch circle. And with this board, I should be able to get 5 of these. 5 on each of the 2 boards for a total of 10. I want to make sure I have enough room between the 2 rings for my bandsaw blade to easily go through there. I'll be cutting all of these discs out on the bandsaw. I want to make sure that when I cut, that I cut on the outside of the line, not touching it and definitely not getting inside, but just on the outside. As you can see, I stayed well outside the line. I would rather have a lot extra than no extra at all. So I'll cut the other pieces and I'll be back. All right, I have my 10 discs cut, and the next step is to figure out how to get the different size discs and rings that I need from these. All right, you might notice that I have a second line on the inside, just to give myself a little bit more room for turning. Now what I want to do is pick one of these rings, and I'm going to start with number 12. I have set my compass to the inside dimension for the larger area of number 12, rather than up here at the smaller one. So I'm setting it for number 12. I'll bring one of these discs in and draw a circle at that dimension. And that makes this number 12 right there. Now for the next one, I want to do the outside dimension on one of these rings, and I want it to be small enough that it's smaller than this dimension with enough room that my parting tool will go between the two. So I'm going to go up to number 15. It's quite a bit smaller here, it looks like. So I'll adjust this to the outside of that ring, bring this disc back in, and draw this circle. And I believe that looks like I've got a lot of room for my parting tool to get in between there. What do I have? I've got 1/4 of an inch, so that should give me lots of room. So now I need to set this to the inside of number 15. All right, that should be good for the inside of number 15. Draw this one. And you will notice that this ring is quite a bit wider than what number 12 is. And that's because it's not going so sharply up, it's coming across that ring, so it needs a lot more width. Now I'm going to do all the rest of these rings, get them all marked, and I will be back. All right, I have all of my rings marked out and one leftover ring. Always a good thing to have in case there's a problem with something I do here. So let's get on to the next step. The reason for the lines I drew, I've got them at 60-degree intervals, and it was so that these are slightly above the center, so I could center these pieces of two-sided tape on there. I got them continuing across here because I don't want to forget, once the disc is on there, where this tape is. These discs are very thin, so I'm going to have to be very careful taking them off. And I also put an X here just to remember which side the tape was on. Now I'm going to use the live center in my tailstock to bring this up to center it and put it against this double-sided tape. And then push real hard to try to get it to seat on that tape. I want to make sure it's not going to come off. And if possible, I will leave this tailstock up here. Now I want to true up the outside of the ring. Now you can see that there is a lot of space between the rings here. So I'm going to go pretty much in the center of that. I don't mind having any of them wider than I need them to be. When I use my parting tool, I like to rock it back and forth in there just to make sure that it's not going to bind in that groove. Now, to try not breaking these rings, these discs as I take them off. And that's coming off very easily so far. All right, and I've got the number 8 on there, so I'll know where it goes. I'll take this one off now, and I'll do the rest of the rings just like I did that one, and I will be back. All right, I have all of the rings cut now, ready to start gluing things together. And I'm going to be doing this in two halves. The bottom half of the bowl and the top half of the bowl will be turned independently and then joined together. And one thing I did was I made the top ring and the bottom ring both much larger than they need to be, because I want plenty of area when I glue these to the glue block. Now when gluing these together, of course you want the bloodwood to match up to a poplar, and the same thing on the other side. And what I'm going to do is, when I put them together, dry fitting, I will put a pencil mark on here just so I make sure that I get the same two together all the time. Then when I'm gluing them, all I have to do is be darn sure that the center ones are both perfectly aligned, and then all the other ones around, all the ones across, will also line up. So I'm going to start gluing these together. I'm going to glue them in pairs, and let's take a look at how to do that. One thing that is essential is that the disc glued to the glue block be perfectly centered. To confirm that, I measure the length of the first strip on each side. If they are the same length, then I know that it is centered. What I have here are rings number 2 and 3. And because they're an even number of strips, the center is right on there, on these two strips. So I have it lined up right on the center here and right on the center here. This end, I have the two flush. The reason for that is that in order to center them this way, I need to know how far over to move it. Now, the distance there is 21/32 of an inch. I do not have a ruler that measures in 64ths of an inch, but I do have my calipers, which I have locked in at 21/64ths of an inch. So I can put this on here, move this ring over until it matches there, line it back up on this other end, double check this. All right, and I'm ready to go. So now I can take my pencil, make a mark around here, and then I will know that that's where it lines up. I can flip this over, make a mark on the inside, and I will know where I need to put the glue. The glue will just be on the outside area here. And now I can use the same techniques to glue the pairs into sets of 4. I've already pre-marked these. So I'm going to glue these up just the way I did the pears. No difference at all. So no use watching a little gluing going on, and I'll be back. This is disc number 1, which will be the base of this turning. And I'm just going to bring up my live center so I can center this. Now let's just check it for center. Looks pretty darn good. Okay, now, as usual, I will use hot glue to attach this. Now, I'd rather not get a lot of glue dripping down onto the face of this disc, but at least with hot glue, if it does, I can cut it and just peel it away. All right, I'm going to let that glue set up, and then I'm going to put another one of these glue blocks that I threaded on here for disc number 18, which will be the top of the vessel. Now it's time to glue the groups of 4 together. This one will be very easy because the outside diameters are the same. Then I will do this one. Not too difficult, all pre-marked, ready to go. When I get these glued up, after the glue has set, I'll be able to put this one onto disc number 1, which will be on a glue block. And I will be able to start turning it shortly after. All right, do you see where the black marks are? How nicely those pieces line up? All right, this is a dry fit, and it was a huge pain to get them to line up and clamp them in place. So I am not going to try showing you when I glue it together, because it's going to take me quite a while, I'm sure. But I will be back when the glue up is finished. Now, I don't know if you can even see in there well enough to tell how it's lined up, but this was really difficult because every time I try to put clamps on it after I put glue on, it would slide all over the place. So I finally used my 4-jaw chuck to put pressure in there a little bit at a time until I got it so I believe it's lined up well enough. So now let's take that chuck out of there. Just see how well that's going to hold. Well, I won't claim that it's perfectly lined up, but I guess we'll know that better after I turn some of this. Bloodwood is a very dry and chippy wood, so I have rehoned my gouge. I want to make sure it's sharp enough to cut very cleanly. I need to put this in here, get a little bit closer with the gouge. I have raised a fresh burr on my scraper, and I'm going to see just what I can do here. It's a negative rake scraper. It's a little bit rough, especially right down in here. And that burr does not last too long, so I'm just going to refreshen that, and I'll do a little bit more in here. All right, this is nice. I am going to sand this now. No one will ever get their finger in here, but to me, that's not the point. So I'm going to sand this off camera, and I'll be back. Zinsser seal coat for the sanding sealer. Well, it turns out that using sanding sealer in here was a bad idea, actually. What it did was it made the bloodwood run into the poplar. Now, I've used bloodwood before and never had that problem. When I discovered it, I was not happy. So I forgot to turn on the camera to show it to you. I returned this and resanded it up to 320 grit, and because I don't want that to happen again, I'm not going to use anything in here at all that might make that run. I'm going to use some Krylon clear transparent finish. I've got this set to turn at 100 RPM. I'll do a few coats in here and see how this works. All right, I'll keep that spinning so it doesn't tend to run, and I will come back after a little while. It says it dries in 10 minutes, and I'll do a couple more coats and then bring you back. I used 4 coats of that Krylon spray. Now I'm going to use Axe Abrasive sanding paste. This is a little bit rough, and we'll see what this will do. Well, that has actually left a better finish than I was expecting. I haven't tried this with the Krylon before. When I do the top half, I'm going to use lacquer, which I did not have yesterday. Now I will use Axe Polish Restoring Paste. That has shined it up very nicely. I believe that's as close as I can get it, so I'll give this lots of time to dry. And then I'll bring you back to see what happens next. Can you hear that difference? Right there, it's really thin, scary thin. That's going to be just sanded in there now. A little more work to do with the scraper down here. that feels so nice. I'm not going to get this any better. So I'm going to use the denatured alcohol to take this glue off. And then I got to find a way to reverse this to take care of the bottom. I have the hollow form in my smaller donut chuck. And to make sure this doesn't fly apart, because usually I use wing nuts like this all the way around, I have got double nuts on one end and a nylon lock nut on the other end of two of these on opposite sides. But I'm still only going to be turning it at 750 RPM using my 3/8 inch bowl gouge. All right. Now I'll understand if you think that I probably broke into some swearing on that, although I just don't do that, so I didn't. But the reason that happened is that the donut chuck that I was using, the donut part, was too large for this little vessel. And so it popped right out of there. Now the one that I'm replacing it with is actually a little too small for it. But rather than have to make another whole donut, I'm going to use this. There's one bit of damage right there where the gouge must have smacked into it when it came flying out of there. There's also a part you're not going to be able to see too likely, but there's a scratch across here, and I'm going to leave that there. A little war wound to remind me. This one, I'm just going to have to see if I can get my Easy Wood scraper in there finely enough to just take that out. So I'm going to go back to 750 RPM, start trying to turn this away, and see if we can do this all over again. And I should have mentioned, I'm doing my best to keep my hand away from these two nuts. Normally they're just inside there, but because I'm using the nylon lock nut out here, I need to have double nuts on this. All right, this is not going too badly. I guess I'll just carry on. Well, that does do a nice job, but to tell you the truth, I think I prefer it with just the axe pastes. This kind of seems a little duller to me, to be honest. Oh well, another experiment.